So good afternoon. My name is Madhavi Chandra, and I'm the Director of Product Management for Informer. So thank you for joining us on our webinar today. We are super excited with this new version of Informer and to be showing it to you all. Trust me, it is packed with new features and improvements across the system. And our engineering team has been working very hard to bring this to you, and we hope that you'll be as excited about it as we are. It has been many, many months in the works, actually dating back to last year when we showed the Informer Advisory Council a sneak peek of some of the features in their initial stages. Now, the IAC, if you're wondering, is a consortium comprised of a small group of our customers and partners that we work with for input and feedback into features before they're released, sometimes even in the design phase, and it is invaluable to us. So I'd really like to thank our IAC members for their active feedback and participation. So now, as you can see, there are a lot of new features in this release. We have some key features that will bolster data governance and business workflows and efficiency just overall and in general. We also added some more support for interacting with large data sets, which means like millions of rows, and wide data sets where you could have many columns and fields in your data. And so we tried to make this more efficient for our users. We also have some new visuals, so you can visualize your data in different ways, and also even a new data source connector. So as you can see, since there is so much in this release, we are actually going to do a webinar series to cover some of the key features in more depth. So my aim in this webinar is to take you on a drive-by tour of some of these features so that you can have an understanding of what's in store for you in Informer 5.4 and orient you to the new release. But be on the lookout for other webinars in our series that will do deeper dives into some of these features. And I'll try to call those out during our webinar. But if you have any questions, do put them in the Q&A section. With only 30 minutes for any questions that we're not able to address in this webinar, rest assured that we will follow up with you directly. So let's go ahead and look at Informer. One of the first things you'll notice on the front landing page is a new top state called Templates. Now, Templates preview will be in experimental mode in version 5.4. So what are templates? Well, templates are custom formatted outputs that can bind to data from datasets, ad hoc queries, or files, and it allows total pixel perfect control over the output. So basically, you can create the exact layout that you desire using HTML with server-side rendering. And this mode that I'm going to show you allows for complete flexibility in designing a template. You can make it look as you wish. You can pull in data from different sources, maybe a query, maybe a data set as you wish. You can add inputs. You basically have total control over the output. So I thought that the best way for me to show you templates is to go into some examples and to show you what's possible in this mode. So here I have a financial aid awards letter. This template is binded to an ad hoc query, and it has an input for student ID, which is already populated for me. And what it's going to do when I run this template down here is it's actually going to run the query with the student ID as the input and populate the template with the respective data. So as you can see, it's totally customizable. You can put in graphics, you can control the layout, maybe put in some formatting, and you can change the parameters down here and rerun the template if you wish. You can come down and into the actions menu here, and you can bundle and download it. You can change the owner, because we foresee that maybe you have like a template group that makes templates and then gives these templates to different teams to go ahead and use them. Or or you can download as a PDF. You can open PDF in a new tab, and if I was to run this, let's see, open this, it will render for you. And as you can see, it's really customizable. You can make this look any way that you wish. This is an financial awards letter, but it could be an admissions letter or any such communication in the university or college. Now let's go and look at a billing invoice. And again, this template that I showed you was backed by an ad hoc query. Now I'm going to show you a billing invoice. And this invoice, we actually uploaded spreadsheets into Informer and made a workspace. And then we created a data set and added some flow steps to help prepare the data. So each page in this invoice is created. So you see the page break, another invoice. These are all different invoices. Each page is a separate invoice, and it's created by an iterative loop for each record in the data set. And again, the data and the layout is completely customizable. So this would be a very easy and efficient way to make invoices all at once. So as you probably surmised, this mode of templates is powerful and it's flexible. And it lays the foundation for future features for templates that we have in store for you, which will include different modes for like customizing existing PDF exporter and other tailored template experiences. And like I said before, we envision that templates will be instrumental in bringing efficiency to some of your business processes. So go ahead and give it a try. Create a new template. You really can't hurt anything. And we actually had one of our IAC members create a custom template within a day with no prior HTML knowledge. And anything that you create while templates is in experimental mode will still persist and be available to you. There will be a webinar on template preview in the coming weeks, so I highly recommend that you attend that webinar. Now let's drive over to the data sources section. And here is where you will set up the new field security and field sets. And the field sets are strictly for organizational purposes, but they really make life a lot easier. So let's go into our Northwinds data source. I'm going to go into my orders mapping, and I'm going to show you field sets. Here I have a couple of field sets that we've already made. And again, a field set is a grouping of where you can put different fields for a common theme. So I've already got a couple of them set up, so let's start using them. I'm going to go into my required date, and let's use that. I'm going to go to my actions button on the bottom, and I'm going to assign it to the field set that already exists called due. And this is where anything that has to do with an order being due will be housed. Let's go ahead and hit the actions button and restrict this field while we're at it. I'd like to take a couple of these fields that have to do with the order and create and put them in a field set. So I'm going to go to assign field set, but I don't want one of these. So let's make a new field set, and let's call it cart. And this is where let's make it green. And I bet we have a pretty cart for us. Let's choose that. There we go. And now I've organized just fields that have to do with my order into cart. But as many of you know, you've got fields across different mappings that have to do with the same theme. So let's go into order details and choose all of these, because as the name suggests, they all have to do with the order, and assign it to that same field set that we just made, cart. And while I'm at it, I'm going to restrict the field discount by my actions menu and restrict, because not everybody needs to know all the discounts. Let's go into my shippers mapping, and we're going to need to know who are the shipper that we're using. And I think that very much has to do with the due date of an order. And that's probably, we should restrict that as well. So now that I've set up some of my field sets and restricted fields, I'm ready to go share it out. And I also did some behind the scenes setting up of restricted fields. I'm gonna share my data source. So the first thing you'll notice is that we have a new shared data source screen where we tried to make it as informative and as intuitive as possible. And we've spelled out what are the different access levels mean. And so you can be very clear when you're deciding which levels to give to a particular user or team. So you have full access, and you have restricted access, and you have data source only access. As full access suggests, you have full access to the query and all the fields in the data source, whether they're restricted or not. Restricted access means you have access to the query, but it will depend on the fields that you give explicitly. And the same for data set access only. So let's go to our executive team and let's give them full access. Well, because they're the executives. So let's do that. Now let's go into the sales team. And for the sales team, we'll give them restricted access. Now, as soon as I toggle this, you'll see that the restricted access fields, these two tabs became available to me, which means I need to go into those restricted fields and decide which of these am I going to give access to the sales team. Now, you can imagine if I have like 50 slides or 50 fields or 100 fields in here, that can be really cumbersome to try to find what I'm looking for. I mean, I could search for it like this and pare it down, but if I didn't know exactly the name of the field, I'd have to like really scroll. That's where field sets will really come in handy. So remember those field sets that we created. So for the sales team, I can go into cart because it has to do with the order, and I can decide whether I want to give anything from the cart field set. And did you notice how it just pared down my view? And I'm going to add this discount for the sales team. I think they also need to be able to keep track of the required date. So I went into the due field set and I narrowed down my view, and now I'm going to add required date to the sales team and save it. So now you see that the sales team has restricted access with 2 fields granted. Let's do this another time for the operations team. And the operations team, again, will give them restricted access. Now I'll go into restricted fields and I'll decide which of these fields to give the operations team. Well, I know they really need to keep track of things that are due. So let's pare down my view, find everything in the due, and pick glance, and I'm going to decide that, yep, I need to give them all. I can either click that from up here or individually select. But since I know I want to add all, I'm going to go ahead and do that and save it out. And the last team is, let's give it to the human resources team because they need to be managing the personnel. But for the human resources team, let's just give them the data set only access. I still need to decide which of the restricted fields to give them. So I will give them probably the PPI, the personal information. And all of those fields look good for the human resources team, so I'm going to add those and save. Now you can see that we shared the data source to different teams with different levels of access, right? Some got restricted, some got data set only, and some got full. And even within that, we gave different access to the restricted field. So we developed this new field security model to allow for granular level security and really robust data governance. This new field security model is completely backwards compatible, and there will be a webinar on it, so please be on the lookout for that. I mentioned to you that we have a new data source driver, a web data source. This is like the Rockstar or All-Star connector. That's because the web data source driver connects Informer 5 to web-based tools, and that opens the door to many, many possibilities. Now, this allows Informer to connect to a REST endpoint to retrieve data from web-based tools. It is an experimental mode in 5.4, but any connections that you set up in 5.4 will persist, and I encourage you to connect to any web-based tools that you may use. Here at Entrinsik, we did so, and we connected to Jira in the cloud, which is what we use to aid, to keep track of our work items for our development team, and it's really helped us with efficiency for our development process. So I encourage you to do that as well using that new driver. Now let's drive to the data set section of the app. Now here's a data set that we created using the web source driver that connected to Jira in the cloud. So once you create the data set by entering the query parameters into the response handler for the data source, it pulls in data using the REST API and functions like any other data set. And so it looks like any other data set. And so we are actually actively working on using the web data source to connect to Zendesk in the cloud, which will really aid our client services department. So now let's go into the Northwinds order data set, which is a sample data set that contains sales data from a fictional food company. So all of this data is fictional. But it has information like salesperson, shipping information, product information, and date. So from within the data set panel, you can see that we have a new field tab icon. If I click that, you'll see that it has opened into a field list page for the data set. And here's where you can, it's like a one-stop shop. You can see the whole list of fields that are part of this data set. You can filter it down by view, by data type. You can, of course, search at the top to narrow down what you're looking for. And so it's a really great way. You can see where the field is coming from and whether it's restricted or not. And all of these are coming from the data source, so they are indeed indexed. We have a new field type called script field. It was in experimental mode in 5.3, so you may have already used it or seen it, but it is a new field, and it's officially released, will be in 5.4, where you can add a column to your data set after it has been indexed. So you may be wondering, what is the difference between a flow step and a script field? Well, the answer is that a script field is a field that is computed when you invoke the field. So if we peel the onion a little bit, you'll see that that means that there is no need to re-index the data when accessing or using the field. You can kind of think of it as like a post-indexing calculated column that you add to your data set and that populates the column. And in contrast, a flow step you use to prepare, clean your data even before the data is indexed. So let's create one, and I think you'll see what I mean. So we have a couple of new script fields right out of the box, concatenate and time between. And the Elasticsearch script is kind of like your Power script, and then you can go to town and build it as you wish. So let's create a time between. And I'm going to call this days until required. And I want this to tell me from right now how many days until this order is required? And tell me in the number of days so I can see how close to my deadline I am. Right now, you can see there is no security on this field that I'm creating. But if you recall, when we were in the data sources section, we actually restricted required date. So it would be really wonderful if we could inherit the same security that we put on required date, since it's used to back this new script field. And we allow you to do that right here. So let's go into the orders mapping, because that's where required date lives, and find the required date. And basically by doing so, I'm saying whatever we have set up for required date, go ahead and inherit that into this new field. And so it's restricted and it's part of this new field set. And so here it is, and we can see now that the source is a script field. So let's go into the data set and go all the way to the end and grab that new field that I created, and I'd like to move it actually right after the required date so that I can see those side by side. And then let's go ahead and sort this by descending order. And if something is late, I need to know about that by a glance. So I think I'm going to make those late things pop out with red. And I just did that by putting some formatting. And because we're at the end of June, I'm going to go into the filter and I'm going to pare down my view. And I really only want to look at last month and this month. Okay, tracking pretty well. We've got some time left. There's some time. Not bad. Ooh, things start getting red, which means things are late, which means we got to peel the onion and figure out, is it something with the supplier, with the shipper, with the salesperson? What in the world happened? But that's a quick way for me to do so by having added this new script field. Now keep in mind that anytime I use this field, it is as of now. So I can always see like how late an order is beyond the required date. And this is an even bigger deal when I'm dealing with large data sets, because I don't have to refresh my data or rerun the data set to get these accurate numbers. Now, I think the more you become familiar with the script field, the more you will appreciate these nuances and the power of the script field and the flexibility that Informer gives you by creating new fields and augmenting your data set, whether it be a script field or a flow step. So you probably saw me scroll to the end to find and grab that new script field. Well, that's because I knew that it was going to be added at the end. But what if I had hundreds of fields in this data set and I'm trying to find a particular field? I mean, I could kind of get whiplash or make myself dizzy trying to find that field. But don't despair. We have really improved our column selections. You can just go to columns and pop out this dialog, and this gives you a rundown of all the fields that are in this data set. And you could pare it down by type to find a field, or you could search for it. And the really, really cool thing here is that I could say, I'm going to clear all of this. Watch what happens. It clears my whole grid, because now I want to figure out what in the world, why were those numbers red? And I need to cut to the chase. So show me those orders and the dates, and show me the days until it's required. And do you notice as I select this, it renders in my grid? And yeah, let me see. Maybe I need to see who are the shipper and who is the supplier for this. And this helps me do my job quicker by just seeing what I need to see at the moment. Oh, wait a minute. I think I need to also know who is the salesperson. I just go to my handy dandy grid, go into text, and let me pull up the salesperson. And maybe I also need to see the category. And as I chose my selection field, it rendered quickly, very performant into my grid. And I think that you'll find that these column choosers to be very efficient and they give you a lot of flexibility, and they're very dynamic and allow you to see what you need at the moment. We do have a webinar on large data, and you'll hear more about script fields and just interactions with large amounts of data, because that really will save a lot of time. Now, let me show you a visual. So I'll go to the Visuals tab, and let's create one of our new visuals. Under Charts, you'll notice I have a new heat map and a spider chart. So let's create that heat map. Now, a heat map is a graphical representation of data where the individual values contained in the matrix are kind of guided by a color axis. So the deeper the shade, the higher the value. So let's create one, and let's say for the, let's keep it as employee for the x-axis, and for the y-axis, we'll get the category. And I want to see this for the overall count. So heat maps are a great way to see concentrations or hotspots in your data, and they're really great if you've got a large amount of data. Because I can quickly look at this and say, whoa, I've got Margaret, Nancy, and Janet. They're like the rock stars because they're much bluer in shade, so they've got more going on than the other end of our employees. I can also look and say, okay, beverages seem to be much more popular than produce, which are lighter shades, and that's probably not a surprise. I can go into a cell, and I can, just as any other visual, see the data that backs it, and I can download those data. I can also go in, and let's say I want to pivot and say, okay, well, where are Margaret? What country are they really coming from? And I can see who the heavy hitters are for her beverage sales. And I can also, drill down by, let's drill down by ship city, and I can see what cities they're coming in from. So we give you a couple more ways to visualize your data, and this is a really strong candidate for large data, and a quick glance tells you what's going on. Now, lastly, let me show you our jobs and some changes we made to jobs to make this more easy for you. Let's create a new job, and then we can actually put this on a schedule. And once we do that, we can add a start date, which defaults to today, and an end date. And I can choose, anything as my end date. And let's put this on a daily interval and save it. And so now I have more control over when my schedule will be run. Some quick added things that we added is right from the jobs list page, you can go down to the actions item and disable a job without having to go into the job itself. Or you can choose them all, or a set of them, go down to the actions item and disable all jobs. We know that jobs are a really big feature and part of your workflows, and we just wanted to make the management more efficient. So, that was quite the tour. It was like 60 miles an hour. But I tried to show you the highlights in our tour of what will be in the Informer 5.4 release. There are definitely things that we didn't get to see, and we hope that what I showed you, that you're going to be as excited to get these new features as we were to develop them for you. And if you've entered a question, be assured that we will follow up with you soon. Do be on the lookout for an official release announcement in the coming days and more webinars in this series. Thank you for attending this webinar, and I hope that you enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you.